Hello and welcome, it's Chris from Christopher Holt Training, and welcome to this week's tutorial where we're going to be talking about how do we build real core stability, because if we're using exercises like sit-ups, crunches, back extensions, side bends, twists, spinal twisting exercises, then these exercises aren't going to be building real core stability. So what we're going to do in this quick tutorial is I'm going to quickly explain a little bit of a difference between core strength and core stability, which helps open our eyes to the different types of exercises that we can be using. Then we'll talk about training core stabilizers and then core strengthening muscles. So we'll sort of delve into the slightly differences in exercises as well. And then right at the end, we will look at some exercises that build or that have the ability to build both. So we'll get straight and stuck into part number one, where we're going to be looking at the difference between core strength and core stability. Part one, the difference between core strength and core stability. Number one, core strength is your ability to hold a position or a posture against either time or load. And in some respects, load is involved in both, but that's the main aim of the core strengthening exercises. It's just locking in, holding a position for either an allotted amount of time or an allotted amount of weight that you're doing it against. When it comes to core stability, this is now more about coordination, balance, and the timing of the muscles. So when they switch on or when they engage. So what we can start to do from those two, in a sense, very sort of brief definitions of core strength and core stability, we can start to understand the type of exercises that we want to use. So what we're going to do next is we're going to open this one out and we're going to go into the gym and talk a little bit more about core exercises for core stabilizers and exercises for core strengthening. In part two, we're going to be looking at core stabilizing exercises which are more in tune with core stabilizing muscles. So when we're talking about core stabilizing, as I mentioned, it's about timing, it's about coordination, and it's about balance. So we're looking at the small stabilizing muscles around the hips, around the spine, and around the shoulder. So we aren't talking about the big global strengthening muscles, we're talking about the smaller, more intricate stabilizing muscles around the joint. So what we are going to be focusing on is, let's just say, the most basic exercise. There's no point in me trying to throw you in at the deep end. So we're going to start the shallow end, and then over time you'll be able to walk down into the deep end, so it becomes a lot more comfortable for you. So we're going to start by using the bird dog. Now the bird dog is a very simple exercise, very good for keeping a healthy spine if we can get it right and we can get the right position. So what we do is we come down onto our knees, we come down onto our hands. Hands below shoulders, knees below hips. So this is our position. We also want to maintain a neutral posture through the spine. So when we lift arm and leg, like we're going to in a second, we want to be able to maintain that position throughout. So you can see here, I'm not overarching and I'm not rounding. I'm holding that position, extending arm and leg. And that's the position that we want to hold. So what we're focusing on here is, how I describe it, it's like anti-rotation. So obviously you've got rotation exercises where we move through the hip, but this one is much more about anti-rotation. So what we don't want to happen is that. So we're using our muscles to engage at the right time to come out and hold our shoulders and our hips level. So this is the position that we would hold. What we would then do, we would then come in, shift the center of gravity. So we're now challenging the balance and then coming back out. All the while holding that position of the spine. Because what we're doing then is we've got the timing of the muscles when we lift, so they switch on at the right time. We've got the balance because we're holding that posture, we're coming out and we're coming back. We're also shifting the center of gravity, which is focusing on not only the balance, but as we move the legs and the arms, we're focusing on the coordination. So we're being able to coordinate our body in a smooth fashion, so we're able to maintain proper posture throughout the entire exercise. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of what core stabilizing exercises should be doing. Not just focusing on balance, not just focusing on coordination, not just focusing on timing, is trying to focus on all three of them. So that is part number 2 where we talked about core stabilising exercises. Now let's move on to core strengthening exercises. So I've talked about core strength, but what you're going to find out soon is that when we do the exercises, we're going to be holding them for a period of time. So this could be called core endurance. That's a better definition of it. I just use the core strengthening term because that's what most people recognise. So when we go into this, we're focusing on holding and resisting against time. So we're holding a posture or a position against time or against a load. So again, we're going to start simple and then we're going to build. So what we want to focus on is holding a position. The easiest exercise for that is a plank. So we come down into position. Again, elbows below shoulders, knees bent, proper position of the spine, and then lift one leg, lift the other. So now my body is now resisting against the time held and the load of my body weight to hold that position. So all I want to do now is, in a sense, hold that for a longer and longer period. Now, I would recommend normally a minute is fine. Then you want to start thinking about other exercises to use. You can go up to 2 minutes. It just depends on whether you want to hold a position for that long. There's, in a sense, nothing wrong with it. If you have back pain, then we would use a different strategy for building that endurance. But essentially, if you've got a healthy back and you want to build a stronger or more endurance in your core, which is going to be better for your back, it's going to be better for your posture, and it's going to be better for your overall strength, then we can start then drawing out the length of the planks. The second exercise, and simple exercise that we can use, is a side plank. So we come into this position, exactly the same, but this time we're focusing a little bit more now into the lateral seam, the lateral tissues down the side of the torso. We would come into that position. Again, we would hold, focus on keeping the position. So the elbows are stacked, the hips are stacked, and there's a straight line going down through sort of ear, shoulder, hip, all the way down to the ankle. We would hold that. And that, again, would be the same idea for the side plank as it is for the plank. Drawing out the time. Again, we wouldn't necessarily go to 2 minutes. You can if you want, but sort of 30 seconds, 45 seconds side plank is sufficient enough for a good base. If you want to push it to a minute, that's absolutely fine. Again, we would come around on the other side just to balance that out. We would do exactly the same on the other side. Elbow below shoulder, shoulders stacked, hips stacked, straight line, ear, shoulder, hip, all the way down to the ankle and holding there. So those are our core strengthening or exercises for core endurance. What we're now going to look at in the final part is exercises that can do a bit of both. So we'll get stuck into that now. Finally, we're looking at exercises that can, in a sense, do a bit of core endurance, core strength, and also stabilising. So we're focusing on the position that we're in, we're focusing on the timing of the muscles, and we're focusing on the coordination and the holding. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise that I call a plank with an arm raise. Now, the goal of this exercise is to keep the hips centered. Now, we have to make sure that we can hold a plank for a sufficient amount of time. If you're pushing sort of 30 seconds up to a minute, you can start to give this exercise a go, because what we want to be able to do is have a good base underneath this exercise, because it is going to require a little bit more tension from the torso, and it's going to require a little bit more in the way of the ability to hold that position. And what I mean by that is we're going to come down into a plank. We're going to do exactly the same. We're going to have our feet slightly wider, elbows slightly narrower. Spine position stays exactly the same. We lift and we hold that plank. What we then do is come into that position, place down. Again, keeping the hips centered, up and down. What we want to try and avoid is this type of thing. That's what we want to avoid, or this type of thing. So we want to stay away from those odd positions. So if you saw me first of all, straight in the plank, that was all good. Then what we've got to do is we've got to lift an arm, but we've got to really focus on keeping those hips still. Now, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of movement to start with, because it's a new exercise. We aren't familiar with what the body's going to do and how it's going to respond. But what we want to be able to do quite quickly is manage that position and hold that position so we can, or keep the hips centered in that position, so we can complete the reps sufficiently and also get the endurance from the core. And when we lift the arm, the hips will switch on to hold in position. So we've got coordination, we've got load in time and body weight, we've got the timing of muscles when we lift the arm up that are going to be stabilising the hip and stabilising the spine on either side when we change the arms around. So that's a very simple first exercise. The second exercise we're going to do is a side plank with a leg raise. Again, it's building endurance, plus it's building that coordination of the hips and the spine and the timing of the muscles as well. So this is exactly the same. We come into this side plank position, elbow below shoulder, stacked, stacked, feet are stacked as well. Come up, keep the bottom of the leg off the floor, and then we lift and place down. Lift and place back on the foot. Lift, place down, lift, place back on the foot. The main goal of when you lift is, again, keeping the hips centered. So we're not letting them move. We're keeping them nice and solid in the middle when we lift the leg off and back. What you want to try and avoid is this type of thing happening, so the hips dropping as you lift the foot. What you might find to start with, that when you come into this position, it's very quick. That's absolutely fine to start with, but you want to be conscious of that, and as you go through, start slowing that movement down so you're building that stability from the hip along with the endurance of the core to be able to hold that position. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and hopefully it's giving you a better idea. So what we'll do now is we'll quickly wrap this up with a summary. To complete this tutorial, just quickly go through and summarise some of the points that we've made as we've gone through. So first of all, we know there is a difference between core strength and core stability. Core strength could also be called core endurance because we're holding a position or a posture against a load or for a period of time. Core stability is more about the timing, engaging of muscles, the balance and the coordination of the muscles. What we would then do is start identifying exercises that can build them individually. So core stability, you've got the bird dog, nice simple example. For core strength and endurance, we're talking about planks and side planks holding the position. When we move into exercises that can develop both, we're talking about plank with arm raise, side plank with leg raise. So we're not only developing holding a posture for a period of time, but we're also bringing in, when we lift that leg or we lift that arm, we're using shoulder stability and hip stability to hold those postures and positions. So we're starting to develop the two together. So hopefully that's given you a better idea of the type of exercise that can build real core stability. It will also build real core strength as well. And it will start developing your body, making your core much healthier, much stronger, and much more robust and resilient, not only to everyday life, but in the gym, for sport, so on and so forth. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Christopher Holt Training. I will speak to you in next week's tutorial.